Bible story and glory of God with these stories. As we talked about with the Esther story and Nehemiah, you see what happened there. So these are just separate stories to just really bring you in more, and kind of like an interlude into the main story if you look at it from a play sort of view. So enters Elihu the Buzite, who is also not an Israelite, who is basically talking to Job and saying, well, yeah, you could be right about some things, but you have no right to basically curse God and to say this and that. And, Job is like, okay, well, look at what's happening to me. And, I've done this. And he just whole list of things he's done, how much he's praised God. Now, God eventually responds to Job and, basically catches him out and says to him, well, were you there when I created, heavens and earth? Were you there when I created the animals? Were you there? Basically giving him a quick rundown of all the stuff he's done. Who are you to question me? Can you tame Leviathan? And can you go near these beasts that I've been there and created? You would basically call them gods if you was near them instead of cursing me. You wouldn't curse Leviathan or you wouldn't curse these beasts, but you would curse me, God, who has given you so much, so on and so forth, which is all stuff to get you out of your rational mind and thinking, well, wait a minute, I've done what I was supposed to do. Like, I don't understand why I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and you do this to me for whatever reason. And again, for you to look at it and not question, amazingly bad shit is going to happen in your life to where you're going to question God. And this is to get through the whole point that none of this shit is true. If you're going to have a contest where you don't want nobody to win, as I said, you have to make the rules impossible to follow. This is real life. This Bible is impossible to follow. You can't live your life by that. And they know this. They understand the rules are impossible. So shit is going to happen to you in life. People are going to die. You're going to get hurt. You're going to be praising God and going to the church and everything like that and stuff. It's not going to work out. And that's what this story is, to get you into the whole thing that, no matter how much praise you give or how good you are before God, and if God is even bragging about you, something can happen, or God can tempt you or test you. And then you're supposed to be strong through, your faith and through the test. And if you are, then you'll come out on the end okay, because what happens with Job? All this stuff happens and God says what he says and basically cusses him out. And then Job, repents and bows down. I'm sorry, Lord, and this and that, and you're right, or whatever. And then what happens in the end, God basically, new wife, new kids, new money and cattle or what have you. He gets everything back, basically. So Job is one of those things where, when you understand how the Bible is structured, you can read it and understand exactly the reverse psychology bullshit they're trying to pull off. Because by this point in the Bible, if you're reading, you're not looking at God the same. There's no way you're looking at this and saying that this God is saying something is wrong with this dude. Something is wrong with these Hebrews. They're crazy. Something is not right. So this will be one of the things that the preacher will skip to this story of Job. Because if you don't put the story of Job in order, in context to everything that's happening, as far as understanding it, this is the poetry portion of the Bible. And in this is poetry, is songs, which we're going to get into next with Psalms. And you will understand why it's there. And then looking at everything that came before, as we have went through, why this is put here. You understand? So it's like the book of Job is not really, if you want to go through it and read it, you'll waste your time. It's other stuff in there that, we'll come back to in the New Testament. As I said, when we get to the New Testament, we'll be coming back to the Old Testament because there's a lot of things that we got to match up. But no point in getting into it now because it's not going to make sense until we go to the New Testament. And which is why we'll come back to these books. But that's basically Job. No real reason to get too much deeper into it because that's what it's about. It's reverse psychology. It's to get you to understand why bad shit happened. And, God is not there for you. He could be testing you. So stay faithful in prayer and stay faithful to him and everything can be rectified. So when stuff go bad in your life, what do people do? They go pray, but they also, frantically try to fix it. And then when they fix it, God's testing you. You see memes all the time. God is testing you. Be careful. God could be testing you. Your bad times could be God testing you. And then I don't know nobody that if you're struggling or you're going through something, you got to get up and go do something about it. Now, if you go get up and do something about it and it changes your situation, that's on your strength. You did that. No higher power did that for you. And why would God put you in that position anyway if you're supposedly living right by the Bible? So now the deeper book to get into is Psalms. And Psalms is deep, even though we're talking about poetry, songs, and prayers, 150 of them, by the way, which is why Psalms are so long. It's basically like, Chronicles, kind of going through the Bible and stuff that happened, because now it's trying to get you ready to get back into the story, you might as well say. But let's go through it and understand what happened is what Psalms is about. And stories about what happened, because now when we leave off with 2 Kings, everything's messed up. You have this whole, cycle of king coming, and then, people worshiping other gods. Then somebody comes and messes up the kingdom, and then somebody brings the kingdom back and start praising everything right. That king dies, the next king does the same thing over and over again. And this is what we see. This is how it left off. But with Psalms, it's almost like the establishment of a new covenant. It's like let's reestablish what God promised us. And let's not forget. Let's tell tales. Let's sing songs about what happened. So when you get into the first two books of Psalms, it's just basically getting into King David, because Psalms is basically split up into about 5 sections. The first couple sections are about King David and everything that happened with him. And then we get into basically the tragedy, all the bad stuff that happened. And then the last couple sections is basically about, the promise that God has promised them and everything that they have to do to fulfill this promise, or to reestablish the promise with God, and to basically get God into forgiving them for everything that happened before. Poems and praises or what have you, about the history and, to God. So the first two is basically getting into, as I said, King David and what happened. And then it's kind of sort of prophesizing the coming of another king that's supposed to help them through this situation. So Psalms comes from the Greek word psalmos, which basically means songs that are sung with a harp, and Greek, of course. And it's really funny because it's like, at this point in the book, what is this? Well, what is this? Why are we deviating away from the story? And it's like, when they broke down Psalms, because these are supposed to be real songs, supposed to be written and supposed to be about the history of Israel. And they found some songs a long time ago, and then they mixed them with some poems a long time ago. And it's all of it supposed to be during the time where the Hebrews are in exile and scattered. And then they're trying to remember their history and what happened. So since they're not together and you got Hebrews scattered all over the place, they supposedly came up with these poems and songs to remember what happened, and to basically, be singing these songs and putting these poems out there to kind of sort of, get God to hear them and understand that they understand what happened and they understand the history and they're sorry for it. So come back and reestablish your promise to us. So let's just skip ahead to Psalms 106. Let's go to verse 29. And it's giving you exactly what I'm saying. And it says, thus they provoked him to anger with their inventions, and the plagues break in upon them. Then stood up Phinehas and executed judgment. And so the plague was stayed, and that was counted unto him for righteousness unto all generations forevermore. They angered him also at the waters of strife, so that it went ill with Moses for their sake, because they provoked his spirit to that he spake unadvisedly with his lips. They did not destroy the nations concerning whom the Lord commanded them. So they basically, as I said, going through the history of what happened and why they are where they are, but were mingled among the heathen and learned their works. And they served their idols, which were a snare unto them. Yea, they sacrificed their sons and their daughters unto devils, and shed innocent blood, even the blood of their sons and of their daughters, whom they sacrificed unto the idols of Canaan. And the land was polluted with blood. Thus were they defiled with their own works, and went a whoring with their own inventions. Therefore was the wrath of the Lord kindled against his people, in so much that he abhorred his own inheritance. So again, they're basically going through the history. This is what happened. So it's songs and poems or what have you. And it's important because it's a lot of things to note with this whole thing, and to go back into Second Kings and to look at what happened. Because as we're doing with the series, you're going to start going in and out with actual history and what the Bible is talking about, so you can understand the message they're trying to give you and how they're trying to convey it to you. So remember the history. You have King David, and then King David dies, and you have Solomon. You have the building. But remember, King David is the one who really wanted to build the temple. He's talking about it, and Solomon's supposed to fulfill this. So Solomon comes in power, and Solomon is told specifically, hey, don't be marrying into these other civilizations and people, because they're going to have you basically going after their gods. And this is exactly what he does. He marries somebody from Egypt, and then he has a bunch of wives, and then they basically get him to do just that, and then following all kinds of different gods. So eventually, we go from Solomon, we get into Elijah comes and is swept off into a whirlwind, and then we have Elisha, who has superpowers basically, and is raising the dead and doing all kinds of stuff. And and the people are basically split. Remember, you have Judah and the people that's in Judah, and then you have the people that's in Israel, and it's split and being ruled by two different kings. We eventually get to Hezekiah, who gets help from Isaiah, and this is where they get into the whole part where they get exiled into Syria and Babylon or what have you. Hezekiah dies. And remember, they told him before he dies that when he does die, his kingdom is basically going to be in ruins. And this is when Nebuchadnezzar is supposed to come and just lay waste to Judah and Israel. And then it's basically where we leaving off with the same stuff happening over and over again with, rulers coming in and scattering the people, and then the people basically not obeying God. So this is where we basically leave off where everything messed up. And that's what the songs are about. And it's like, okay, we understand we messed up. This is what happened. We acknowledge it. And then, what are we going to do to fix it? Now, you have to notice in this story that there's a lot of involvement with Egypt, because they're trying to basically fit these people within the timelines we talk about. Because, David was supposed to fulfill the promise, that God gave, to his ancestors, and he didn't do that. Solomon, all he had to do was God was going to give him everything. He told him straight up, if you listen, you and your kids, if y'all follow me and listen, y'all basically set. Soon as y'all start basically marrying outside of the people and going against, following other gods, it's going to be a problem. And this is one of the biggest things we're going to get into in this video and upcoming videos about this, because it's going to blow your mind when we start touching on this whole other gods thing. But he doesn't do it. We see what happened. But the point is, they're trying to inject these people in a timeline with Thutmose III. So you'll see people make that reference, because this is one of the reasons why I came back up with this video, because a lot of people are getting into that. And the Bible story tells us that Solomon married one of Pharaoh's daughters. They never say the Pharaoh. They never talk about the family, the Egyptian family, except for, he married one of the pharaohs. And supposedly, Solomon's temple was built somewhere close to this Egyptian kingdom. Now, you have to understand when you're reading the Bible, a lot of people ain't going to pick up on this. A lot of times they're letting you understand how, and you should understand already, this is Egyptian territory, and this is how they get through all that, by not really being specific about certain places and people. Because during this time, supposedly, this is Egyptian territory. Israel is being ruled by the Egyptians. This is all black people here. So they're trying to tiptoe around this. And you understand, if you're going to be doing anything here, you're dealing with the Egyptians, and they know this. Now, the whole thing is when you understand the story and what it's talking about in that story about Gezer being burnt to the ground. This is stuff that we can prove that Moses had this city burnt to the ground. It was rebuilt, and it was supposedly burnt down again or destroyed by Miriam Patah. So they trying, and this is what the Miriam Patah Stela is about. It's one of the reasons why I went to go see it in the Cairo Museum and talk to the curator and people about that whole thing and was it edited, because in the Miriam Patah Stela it's talking about Miriam Patah burning this city Gezer, which is that's what it's saying, that, but they changed it to Israel. That's broad. That's not specific enough. He didn't burn down the entire Israel. So, and I can get into that whole thing. It's changed, and none of them believe that it says Israel, but because it didn't exist around this time, of course. But this is how they're trying to make the connections and connect those dots to make these people fit within history. The thing is, when Miriam Patah destroyed this city, this is the 13th century we're talking about. So there's no way in the world, the timeline doesn't fit with Solomon and Solomon's temple. So it doesn't fit within that timeline. So Solomon himself is supposed to have lived between, I think, 970 to like 931 BC, which we know is bullshit. So it's not fitting in that time. We don't have any proof that Solomon ever even existed. So we know this is about masonry, but Solomon's temple and everything, the way it's laid out, which we'll get into that in a different video, how that all adds up. But there was the reason why it's even here and why they even mention a temple at all, because in this place and during this time, there was a temple there that belonged to the ancient Egyptians. And the measurements of the temple is the only thing that we can find that could be on par with a Solomon's temple. Now, when you go into the Bible, it's talking about, Jewish temples being built and knocked down, then rebuilt, knocked down, and so on and so forth. And again, anybody that's in this period or around this time understand this is Egyptian territory. And all they're doing is talking about buildings that they themselves laid siege to that belonged to the Egyptians because of what was there or what happened during conquest. A lot of stuff got burnt down. And of course, they didn't want to burn down too much, but there's certain places they couldn't leave standing because everything that's in there destroys what they're trying to do. It's a lot of those places. So article popped up a while ago saying Egyptian people claims Jewish temple was never in Jerusalem, which that is big. And they're saying this Jewish place of worship was actually converted from an Egyptian building that was in Galilee, which we know it had to have some connection for them to even be talking about Galilee. Any place they mention in the Bible has to have some type of connection that they can connect themselves to. But who was actually there was the Egyptians. So it says there, I'm just going to skip to this article real fast. It says, finally, the article claims that the dimensions of the temple itself match that of ancient Egyptian temples from the Pharaonic period. What the Jews called their temple, the report says, may have been converted from an abandoned Egyptian military garrison in Palestine, which they took over. Prior to Israel taking control of the Temple Mount in 1967, there was a consensus in the Arab and Muslim world that state, now home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, was the site of the biblical Jewish temple. Such attitudes can be seen in the 1924 guide to the Haram al-Sharif, as the Temple Mount is known in Arabic, published by the Muslim Waqf, which had no qualms mentioning the presence of two Jewish temples atop the Jerusalem compound in antiquity. In October, Sheikh Mohammed Ahmad Hussein, Mufti of Jerusalem, claimed that there was never a Jewish temple on the site, and that, in fact, the Al-Aqsa Mosque had been there since the creation of the world. Right. According to historians, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built during the Umayyad dynasty and is believed, that's what they always like to say, believed to have been completed in 705 CE. So we understand, we know this history and timeline doesn't fit.